Fantastic. Well, welcome everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today on our IxDF Southampton and Bournemouth meetup. Today we have with us Dr. Blay Whitby. Now, I had the pleasure of meeting Blay down in Brighton at UX Brighton at the end of last year, and over pizza, I got introduced to philosophy and ethics of AI, amongst other things, and I felt it'd be really informative for us to meet and hear what he has to share in particularly with everything that's going on today with AI and its advances. So thank you for joining us. Now, Blay is a philosopher and ethics expert concerned with social impact of new and emerging technologies. His work has done much to increase informed debate on ethical dilemmas posed by new technologies in social and domestic settings. So I'm going to hand over to Blay, and he'll do a much better job than I of carrying on from this point.
Okay, thanks. Shall I share my screen and go through the slides?
Yes, please do, yes.
Apparently computers are getting faster all the time. Okay, you can contact me on that email. And I'm going to start with a disclaimer. And the disclaimer is not just to avoid legal repercussions. I want to sort of lead by example and say, I'm taking responsibility for what I say, because a crucial professional responsibility. People often hear the professional, but they don't hear responsibility, which is interesting, but I'm showing by example responsibility. And this is what I want to go through. In order to get the time down, I may have to jump some of these things or cut it very short. And as I say there, you're supposed to finish your talk on a high note, and the only high note I've got is there's an awful lot of opportunities for you to improve things in this area. It's what pilots call a target-rich environment, because frankly, your predecessors have not done that well. Now, I've been in this field an awfully long time. So before you were all born, in 1988, I published a book, Artificial Intelligence, a Handbook of Professionalism, which covered the major impacts of AI, even back then, and contained a code of conduct and an argument that I pushed most of my career, which is the main people who should take responsibility for doing AI ethically are those who do it. You don't have to agree. I'm not saying that lawyers and governments don't have their role, they do, but they're generally playing catch up with the technology. They generally don't understand the technology, and a lot of responsibility comes with the people actually building it. And because of that, I'll give a brief plug to BCS, because I've worked hard with BCS. I was on their ethics committee for a long time. Codes of conduct. Unlikely, I won't take a poll on who can remember codes of conduct. I'll go to the one that I should be plugging, which is BCS. I'm not claiming credit for this, but I was in the room when we drew it up, and I rather like it, or I like the slogans because they're easy to remember. In particular, the first slogan, which was, a pet of mine, which is "You make IT for everyone." And at this point, I suppose if you're mainly UX designers, that sort of audience, I'm going to have to give a plug for UX because, in a way, you make IT for everyone is no news to UX. But I'm so old, of course, I remember the days when there was no UX, or the kind of was, because Nielsen's 10 principles date from the last century. And I still find, I wouldn't say most, but an awful lot of the IT that I actually use in my daily life doesn't embody Nielsen's principles. There's some notable omissions. In particular, I'm still seeing hexadecimal error codes, which, he really did say don't do this last century. Okay, enough about codes and the BCS. So I'm talking about being professional, the IT profession, comparing it to medicine and so on. But it's an open question for you. Is it really a profession? Because you might feel that it's not. But if it is a profession, and I've kind of christened it a profession, then it's interesting to consider just how professional is it. And my view is, well, definitely could do better. Okay, so my first disaster is probably now so old that you don't know it. It's not a routine one discussed these days, but it was a pretty big disaster at the time, 1992. The London Ambulance Service introduced a computer-aided dispatch system, and after a few hours, serious problems emerged. Well, they switched it on and it didn't work. Not very professional. And this caused a number of deaths. How many deaths? It's difficult to say, but in some cases, ambulances took 48 hours to reach an emergency call. So anywhere between 20 and 50 deaths is a reasonable guess. In fact, what they did was, having realized that it didn't work, they simply turned it off and went back to a paper-based system, and then sulked for many years and didn't introduce a computer dispatch system. And you might be thinking, well, 1992, computer dispatch systems for ambulances were cutting-edge technology then, and it's not surprising that it didn't work. Well, you'd be wrong about that, because by 1992, there were two such systems working successfully in the UK, one in Strathclyde in the Glasgow area and one in the West Midlands in the Birmingham area, covering fairly large areas. They were big systems, they were working successfully. And of course, as is the tradition in the IT industry, a lot of the comment appeared subsequently in Computer Weekly and Wired, and a lot of it was from the companies who built those two successful systems, saying, if you'd come to us, we could have delivered a good system. And that's a typical pattern. There isn't proper investigation of disasters. And I've got something coming up later to say that you could make such proper technical investigations, basically on the aviation model. If an airliner crashes, you don't get the only commentary coming from rival manufacturers saying, well, if you'd bought an Airbus, you wouldn't have had this problem. There are proper investigation in this country handled by the Air Accident Investigation Branch. Significantly, it's a no blame investigation, but they leave no stone unturned to work out what happened. The reason for that being they can then make recommendations to stop that particular set of problems happening again. And I would suggest that over the last 50 years or so, that technique is the main thing that's made flying so much safer than pretty much any other form of travel. It's not intrinsically safe, but things can be made safe, and that's a good way to make them safe. And obviously, I think, you might not agree, I think it's ridiculous that we're not taking the same approach to AI technology, which is being integrated into so many systems and so on. Anyway, let's carry on with this. The acronym at the bottom of the screen there is a Whitbyism. It stands for "This is not an exhaustive list." But the system couldn't handle imperfect data. Now, it's not the only system over the years that couldn't handle imperfect data. In fact, most systems still can't handle imperfect data. And the standard gripe from AI firms in the Palace of Westminster and the All-Party Parliamentary Group is, can you do something about the data that the training sets that we get, because it's all contaminated, as if bad data is the fault of the government for some reason. But most data is imperfect. And you also need to hear, this is important for AI, that any data set about humans will be biased. It will contain bias. The proof of that being the Amazon CV selecting system from 2015. Ask me about it in the questions if you don't know that one backwards. Interface issues. It will surprise a UX audience to hear that when the system was turned on, that was the first time the operators had actually seen it. They'd had no training at all. None of the interface had been discussed with them. That's a stupid mistake, but nonetheless, that was one of the mistakes made in this. And memory leaks were quite common in every PC at the time. The operating system failed to do complete garbage collection, and eventually your hard drive would fill up. It wasn't very good, but hey, things are much better now. Maybe you know about this one. It's more recently, but Cambridge Analytica were using Facebook or using an unauthorized, no consent form, no consent collection of personal data via Facebook to sell important personal data to political actors. Cambridge Analytica were caught, exposed, and went out of business. However, there is really no strong legal protection to stop this sort of thing happening again. That these are real problems. Now, BCS don't want me to talk about the Fujitsu Post Office Horizon system because there's some embarrassment for BCS in it, but it's again, what can I say? Help desk say, it's your fault. You're the only person who has problems with the system. Professional responsibility, not impressive. Here we are, 700 prosecutions, maybe 14 suicides. So when I say, disaster or scandal or things going wrong, this is not a video game that doesn't work or a word processor that's got known bugs. This is having serious human consequences. If we're going to talk ethics, then this shouldn't happen. It really shouldn't happen. It's clearly wrong. And here's another. It's not hard to find these things. Maybe you remember during COVID, we were going to have a world-building test and trace system. About £35 million was spent for no system. Now, a lot of my friends in the industry do the standard blaming the user or blaming the customer problem. They say, well, the government's just a very bad customer for IT. They don't know what they want. They change the specification. So, it's their fault these systems go wrong. Well, there may be a lot of truth in that because, the government are not particularly wise when it comes to buying these big IT systems, and often manipulated by the industry, let me say. But again, if we're talking professionalism, if we're talking professional responsibility, letting these things happen can't really be justified. I mean, when I say how professional is the IT industry, the answer is, well, frankly, it hasn't done very well. Could do better, like I said. And no, I mean, again, I have to give UX an honourable get out here, because the tradition of blaming the user is obviously not available in UX. Although, I mean, I could cynically say that I'm so old, I remember the days before UX. I remember systems that really weren't usable and system designers who didn't want them to be usable. People were proud of their knowledge of Unix commands, which they kind of kept as a sort of Masonic rite of passage. You needed to know these things, and only if you were an insider did you get them. And I could cynically say that the discipline of UX emerged because when people started building large online shops, retailing online in particular, if your site was unusable, then people just clicked and spent elsewhere, and so is born the discipline of UX. You've got to deliver what the user wants, what the user expects fairly quickly when there's competition only a click of a mouse away. But that was definitely an improvement on what went before. And if your software is so bad, as in these cases, that it's causing deaths and so on, you can't say, oh, well, you shouldn't use it. That's just not an available excuse in 2026. Really, we should do better. Does that look professional? I mean, I'm throwing out questions to you here, but no doubt you'll be thinking about them. Since I've got a psychologically aware audience, can I go over the risky shift? You should know about the risky shift. A shared decision is more risky, and this leads to groupthink. But sometimes called the normalization of deviance in accident reports, where people just start accepting of what's obviously a risky situation. But the reason I want to talk about groupthink is something that I don't think people are saying, but I'm going to say very loudly, right? Large language models, of which there's now, I don't know, between 7 and 10 readily available to you. They are very much the technology of the moment. They are pure groupthink, right? Because what they're doing is looking for consensus on the web. One thing I make my students do, and which they don't want to do, but it's worth doing, is for any question where you actually consult an AI, consult more than one. Consult 3, 4. You'd think they'd all give the same answer, but they don't. And they give surprisingly different answers, which is intriguing. And you should, to trust one large language model is foolish, is all I can say. Always worth getting a second opinion and a third opinion. And you probably don't believe me, but try it and you'll see. Because what we're now talking about is groupthink. We're talking about not questioning assumptions, quite the reverse. We're talking about taking a statistical balance of what will be the most likely thing about that, and it's incredibly error prone. And what's more, psychologists have known about this for decades. Who can be held responsible? Well, again, I'm throwing out questions, but my answer would be everybody involved, right? Including people who unwittingly produce the data because their data's been scraped. And I should throw in here, because I'll forget to tell you otherwise, that when I was in a meeting of the All-Party Parliamentary Advice Group on AI last year, a few months ago, I got the distinct impression that this government is much more interested in promoting the AI industry than in protecting people and protecting intellectual property in any way. And they had very little sympathy for artists who need to make a living from copyright, for example, and complaining that their work's being scraped. And also, I should flag that in terms of IT legislation, the UK and the EU have been in lockstep even since Brexit. And one of the reasons for that, again, none of this is secret. One of the reasons for that is I was involved in the negotiations about GDPR, which you'll say, if you were a lawyer, you say, well, GDPR doesn't apply in the UK since Brexit. No, it doesn't, but it was very swiftly enacted as the Data Protection Act 2018. And the differences between that and GDPR are very small. And most people in the industry still say GDPR. But what is not so commonly known in the industry is basically it was only Britain and Germany that wanted GDPR. So GDPR is a very UK-led piece of legislation. However, the subsequent legislation, the EU AI Act, doesn't apply in the UK, and the government are not sympathetic to it. Whether or not it'll be in full force in Europe, I don't know. I regard it as very well-minded in principle. The idea of transparent and responsible AI seems very good. How it works out in practice, we shall see. But I might as well share with you that the UK government is much more inclined to give the industry a free rein than to force that legislation. What do I think? I think the industry should behave responsibly, like it says on the screen. Now, I've mentioned investigation of aviation accidents, and I want to say that we could, if we wanted, have worldwide legislation, because I think single country legislation is going to be a bit difficult in the age of the World Wide Web. All you're going to do is hurt your own industry because people move elsewhere. It does need to be worldwide. And if you think that's impossible, look on the screen. There's an existence proof, right? So I think there are only 15 countries signed up to the International Civil Aviation Order in 1944. But now it's every country in the world, literally, including North Korea and China and so on. They're all playing by the same rules. And some of the rules, people find annoying. One of the rules being that you're going to have to speak English over the radio, or aviation English at least, which the French find very, very annoying. But that is now the law throughout the world. And also, you're going to have to publish navigational information in English. You can publish it in French as well if you like, but you will be required to publish it in English because that is the international language of aviation. And here's the thing, the standard objections to regulation, what you heard from Kratsios in Delhi a couple of weeks ago, that it'll hold back the industry and so on, they don't really seem to apply in aviation. It's a highly regulated activity, but it's also highly profitable. It's expanded massively. Regulation has made a great contribution to safety, but it hasn't made it unprofitable or or held back technological innovation. I think it's an existence proof that it could be done. However, we're going to have to say, will it be done? And it doesn't look likely to me. Some differences. In 1947, the United Nations, remember the International Civil Aviation Organization is a UN body, was at the height of its powers. The UN doesn't look so flavor of the month now, at least not to me. It's a shame, but the UN is nothing like so respected as it was in 1947. And I'd also point out there've been a number of AI conferences, starting with AI safety at Bletchley Park in 2022 and coming around now to AI impact in Delhi. Do those name changes actually signify anything? Maybe, maybe not. But yeah, it's all in the title there. That was then and this is now. It doesn't look to me like there's real pressure to make AI like civil aviation, to make it safe and regulated on a global scale. In practice, there's many problems. I won't labour these problems because I'll hear what you think about them. I think there's an undeclared cyber war. I doubt if you disagree with me. I would again, I'll just talk experience. At AI military conferences last century, I might have said, in fact, I did say once, I said, I think that the next war will be a cyber war. And somebody in uniform took me on to one side at lunchtime and said, who told you that? That's classified. And I said, well, I was just guessing. Of course, if I said at a military conference now, the next war will be a cyber war, I'd just they'd laugh. They'd say, what do you mean next? It's happening. Haven't you noticed? It's all going on. But it's undeclared, and it's not even clear who the participants are. So I'd compare it to the heydays of piracy, particularly in the North Atlantic trade, and say web piracy is very similar. Someone sails up to you flying the skull and crossbones. You don't know whether it's the first thing I've got there, plain old-fashioned crime. Could be just kids showing off these days as well, plain old-fashioned crime, or that you're dealing with a so-called privateer. In other words, someone who's got permission from the government to do this sort of thing. And I should imagine if you were attacked, you wouldn't much care which one it is. And of course, there's what my friends in cybersecurity call state actors. Certain states, which I mustn't name, do actually engage in this as a form of warfare or near to war. That's where we are. And of course, the fact that that's the state of play on the web means that regulation is already hamstrung, even as I say it. You're going to say, what are you going to do about this? So that's a problem to let you know. Okay, I think I've got time to talk about this. It's a very old paper, 1984, but hear this. I don't want to sit here saying "told you so," but here's an example. Right, that paper was called "Some Immediate Dangers." AI, some immediate dangers. So they were immediate in 1984. In fact, I only pulled out two immediate dangers in that paper. One was that using AI a lot would put pressure on people to conform and behave more like AI than like humans. And I would say, yes, I've seen that happen. So-called blandification. But the other danger, which gives rise to the title of the slide, is I said that AI was a powerful technology and we should take steps to stop it falling into the hands of an elite. Well, that was then, it's 2026 now, and it has fallen into the hands of an elite. There's no doubt about it. It's nothing to stop you building an AI system tomorrow, because if it's any good, if it's a threat, you will be bought out by a large tech company based on the west coast of America. You can hold out against being bought out. You'll notice OpenAI tried to remain open, but not terribly successfully. It has fallen into the hands of an elite, and in many ways, I think this elite is tolerated. As where the March of Lords, I'm guessing some of you will know exactly what I mean by the March of Lords, but some of you I'll have to give a brief explanation. There's a story put about that Duke William the Bastard landed at Norman's Bay, fought a battle just down the coast here at Battle in 1066, and was therefore able to take over the country peacefully. Not quite true. There was an awful lot of violence, ethnic cleansing. The Saxon aristocracy was wiped out, which is why the language that we now speak, called English, has a dismantled grammar. That half the cases are missing. There's no future tense, because essentially it was the language of the peasantry. The more refined forms of English were lost, and of course most of our words about power and gouvernement are French. But the March of Lords was settled in what's called the Welsh Marches, where you'll still find a lot of castles. The most violent, the most militaristic lords were given lands there. And their job, of course, was to stop invasion by the Welsh, because if the Welsh had got their act together, they could easily have invaded. So they were given far more power than the average lord. They could build castles, raise armies, all without asking permission from the king. Now, there is a story, possibly apocryphal, I don't know, but there is a story illustrating this, about a messenger arriving from London to the court of a martial lord with a proclamation from the king, and the lord making him eat the proclamation, wax seal and all, in front of everybody, with the words, "The king's writ does not run in the marshes." That's how much power they had. Now, I have no difficulty imagining Lord Zuckerberg saying to a congressional committee, the FBI has no jurisdiction in the metaverse. I'm pretty sure that's what he believes. So this is my parallel. A lot of people, in particular the US government, know that this elite have a lot of power, but they are holding the frontier, because we know that if, for example, Amazon was split up into smaller companies, which might comply with US monopoly law, but if that were to happen, then Alibaba is only too quick to move in. So are we tolerating this particular elite because they're holding the frontier again? I suspect yes. Right, they're the main defense against hostile state actors that I'm probably not allowed to name. There is international legislation forbidding criticism of certain governments. Look it up if you don't believe me. So I'm not going to fall into the trap of criticizing them online in a presentation that's being recorded. But I'm just raising the possibility that some of these people that we know have wealth beyond all imagining and an awful lot of power actually are there to hold a line of defense. Okay, so now I'm wrapping up on a high note. First, I've got to apologize and quote from an old reggae song. There are more questions than answers. And I'm sorry about that. I'm sorry that there are more questions than answers. But I want to try and end on a high note. You're working in an exciting field, and there are a lot of possibilities here. And just being responsible, even if you're only responsible in your small corner, even if you just don't do the worst things that you see people around you do, because that normalization of deviance is important. And as an ethicist, I would strongly say that the main reason people do bad things is simply because everyone else around them is doing bad things. So you can't afford not to care about this bad track record of the IT industry. I mean, you should care, and you should say, well, at least I won't do that. And for anyone who has been, thank you for listening. There's a lot on there, but the slide deck will be available. So I'm going to stop sharing now and let people come back at me because there were a lot of questions in there and a lot of issues over a very wide area.
Blay, thank you so much. Various people are giving you and clapping and hearts. You raised some fantastic questions and gave us some very big examples of where we have failed in the IT industry. Floor's open. Does anybody have any questions that they would like to ask Blay while he's here with us at the moment?
I've got a question, if I may.
Yes, Sharon, go for it.
Thank you. First of all, thank you, Blay. It's lovely to hear from you, and we had some great conversations at UX Brighton as well. And I would just like to ask what your take is on Anthropic's approach. It's recently been in the news, obviously, because of its breakdown of the relationship with the American government. Also, interestingly, today, it's actually just been recently reading an article about how it's one of the very few LLMs that doesn't promote gun shooting, basically, and how to encourage, people who are sort of pretending to be 13-year-old boys and planning mass murders with their guns. And actually, it's one of the very few that's pushed back. And I'm just kind of curious to see what your thoughts are about that, and how is this a good example of people taking responsibility as a wider organisation?
I think so. I wish I could say things to encourage Anthropic, but they've been incredibly harshly treated. Last I heard, they'd been declared a threat, a local terrorist threat, for simply refusing to allow their AI to be used in lethal autonomous weapons systems. Well, look, let me deal with lethal autonomous weapons systems first. The UN is probably going to ban them. Right. This has been debated for more than a decade in Geneva. There was a petition, and I was one of the people who signed the original petition against lethal autonomous weapons. If you believe in them, that's fine. Everyone's entitled to their opinion. I'll say my problem with lethal autonomous weapons is it kind of at the beginning of the talk. They allow humans to avoid responsibility. And I think humans have a very bad track record of blaming other people if they possibly can, and blaming the computer all the time now instead of taking responsibility. And lethal autonomous weapons systems are just an open door to that. So people will say, we don't know why the drone took out your village, but you must have done something wrong. It's AI, you see. We don't know what you've done wrong, but you must have done something wrong. And that's that's my personal objection. Noel Starkey at Sheffield has campaigned against them pretty much all his working life. His objection is more basic. He says, "Do you want to be killed by an algorithm?" But so the whole idea that a US company should be forced to participate in something that I think the UN is about to ban altogether. There are a number of countries who haven't agreed. Russia and North Korea, and somewhere else, a third country. Only three objections, but only three countries won't be covered by this treaty. Yeah, that and to be declared a terrorist because you won't do that. And their other ethical constraint is they don't want to use it to spy on US citizens. And again, that seems perfectly respectable to me. And they're being very harshly treated. Of course, in the hard commercial world, whether or not anyone else can afford to do this, I'm not really sure. And I'm very aware that it's easy for me to say, "Oh, this is wrong," right? But if you're in a situation where you're working for someone and they'll sack you if you don't do it, or they'll take commercial steps against you, then there are other considerations. I have to, but then, I can't say, "Oh, well, that makes it all right then." If you see what I mean. So my position is, I think I'm impressed that Anthropic have taken this decision, and it's a shame that other players in the industry aren't prepared to be. It's not exactly woke to simply say no lethal autonomous weapons systems and no spying on US citizens. It's not dangerously left wing for what all the government says. This is a perfectly moderate objection in my opinion. And it is only my opinion. I take responsibility. And have I answered your question, Sharon?
I think so. I think what you say doesn't surprise me at all. I think it's really interesting at this time talking about ethical AI and our professional responsibility. I wonder if actually having some big players like Anthropic leading the way, or seemingly leading the way by actually standing up for what they believe in, is a good example for us as individuals to actually look up to and go, yes, it is acceptable to push back. There will be challenges. But again, maybe it's joining that sort of group, as we were talking about earlier. It's individual decisions versus group decisions, and sometimes it's easier to stand behind someone else, and maybe this is an example of someone else doing the right thing for once.
Well, I suppose you could support Anthropic by using Claude instead of ChatGPT 4 or whatever you use. Please hear my plea to use more than one large language model, because they do not all deliver the same answer. And I don't know, I heard that Grok pronounced Elon Musk the cleverest, most beautiful, perfect human being, and I don't know whether that's been fixed, but the word "fix" has delicious ambiguity in that context. Makes you wonder what was going on in the first place.
What data set did it use?
Yeah.
Does anybody else have any other questions that they would like to ask Blay at this moment?
No, everyone knows the Amazon CV system. Then I don't need to talk through that. Do you know about it, Tim?
Yeah, probably not in the same detail as you, but
I don't know about any detail, but I thought people might want to ask me about that, because
please briefly go over it just to make sure we are all on the same page.
Okay, 2015, I think it was. Amazon decided to introduce a CV sorting system, and their AI lab, or their main AI labs, are based in Edinburgh, of all places. Maybe you're not supposed to know this, but they are, and their brief was to make a system, an AI system, an artificial neural net that would reject 95% of applications for tech jobs in Amazon. And they duly did this, and it took the top, you see, 5%. Top's another deliciously ambiguous word here. 5% of CVs. And credit to the researchers, within a few months, they worked out that it had become incredibly misogynistic. Basically, any hint of femininity was enough to get your CV rejected. You're looking puzzled, Tim. Is this not the way you remember the story?
This is the one I know.
Okay. Yeah. So if I'd said I gave a talk at a girls' school last year, the year before I did, that just that very word "girls" would get my CV binned, and they saw this was a problem, and they couldn't fix it, so they stopped it. There's some crucial lessons in that. One is, I tell students all data is biased, and that's a bit of an exaggeration, because if your data is, I don't know, prime numbers with more than 4 digits, it's hard to see that there would be bias in that. But if it's human data, and I would suspect that everybody listening to me today works with human data, right? If it's human data, then it contains bias. Just know that. No one at the Edinburgh Research Labs wanted the system to exclude on the basis of gender. It learned that all for itself, all by itself. It learned that, so there's a warning how AI can go wrong. And if I could put it stronger than that, it's a warning how AI will go wrong. Right? It will pick up the biases in your data and emphasize them. And of course, we know now the mistake they made as they trained it on past data, right? And if you train on past data, the training set was CVs of people who'd got technical jobs in Amazon. And if you train on past data, you're saying, more of this, please. Could you just intensify this? And of course, you'll all come back to me and say, well, what other sort of data could we train it on? Which is a fair pushback. But if you train on past data, if you train on past CVs, right, don't be surprised when your system pulls out certain salient features and emphasizes that. You train on past data, you're telling the system to give you more of the same. And AI is very good at finding the pattern, if there is one, and it could be gender, and giving you more of the same. So a very important lesson. Has anybody learned that lesson? If you apply for a job now, almost say, well, you guys are probably doing recruiting. You tell me. I bet you use AI to sift CVs. Everybody does, right? It's the norm. So I was told by someone at IBM, but admittedly a few years back, that because of the Amazon debacle, they would never, ever use AI to sort CVs. They'd always do it, always get a human to do it. But these days, it's going to be a vast amount of work that you don't have the staff for. So people are using AI to sort CVs. In fact, again, you probably know more about this than I do. I'm told that there's a whole cat and mouse game going on with people rigging CVs to fool AI. The question is, which AI is going to look at your CV? So can you, like search engine optimization, can you AI CV sorting system optimize your CV. I don't know how to do that. And I've told anybody caught using the white on white text trick will be automatically disqualified, because that's probably an old trick now.
Yeah, it's interesting, this debate around AIs and CVs. I was talking to someone I know in the village who works in recruitment, and they work in the healthcare sector. And at the moment, their company's policy is no AI use within CVs. In fact, if they suspect that you've used AI to write your CV, they will disqualify you. So it's an interesting balance, because, of course, some companies are absolutely pushing for you to use AI as much as possible, and others are still trying to make sure that they get people through who are writing their own CVs and not using AI for it. So it's very interesting balance.
One thing on the using AI in your daily job. My January job's being an ethics expert for the EU and examining a number of proposals for, big proposals for funding under the Horizon scheme. And we were told in a big briefing beforehand, it must be 300 ethics experts, because, at least two would look at every project. We were told not to use AI at all, not to help prepare our reports and so on, not because they wanted us to think for ourselves, but because by doing so, we would be sharing confidential data. And that's something that I think is not talked about enough. If you say, hey, Claude, or whoever, Gemini, help me prepare this report, you are sharing the data in that report, which is very probably confidential.
Yes, that is a massive challenge, isn't it? Of course, how do you keep your data confidential? So I'm going to round up by saying a massive thank you to Blay for joining us today. He's done this out of the goodness of his own heart to help all of us understand the field of ethics and ask questions around our use of AI and how we are professional in the IT industry. So thank you so much for that.
Can I say, feel free to get in touch with me?
Yes, yeah, please.
Did you want to say goodbye, Tim?
Oh, sorry. I thought you said you're going to show how to get in touch with you. Sorry, my mistake.
Oh, there's probably a Sussex email address on the slides, which is best for me. If you Google Blay Whitby, it's a distinctive name, and I was around on the internet before there was a World Wide Web. That's how long I've been around. But because I was an early adopter, I was probably within the first 10 or 20,000 to join Facebook. I've also been an early regretter, and I'm working on a paper called World Wide Web, What Went Wrong, you see, with all the W's, because to me, it has gone wrong. And probably you're more tolerant. Either you like the frog being boiled, or you just don't remember the days when security wasn't an issue. And I quite resent having to prove that I'm not a robot. I mean, not because that's a particular chore, but it tells me I'm hanging in an area where there are robots, and maybe I want to hang with human beings, right? Can I leave the robots, please, and go play with the humans? Is how I feel every time I'm asked to prove I'm not a robot. And as for 3-factor authentication, I feel it's like, I used to live in a neighborhood where people leave their front doors open. Now I'm being told I need more and more locks on the front door. It's not a good feeling, you see. Hence, World Wide Web, what went wrong? So yeah, but it's easy to find me. blayw@sussex.ac.uk. It's what I should have said at the beginning, because that would have let you all get away sooner.
Thank you, Blay. So for those of you who are local to the Southampton area, we are going to have a meetup next month on the 15th. That's a Wednesday the 15th of April. Keep an eye on Instagram and LinkedIn, and we'll post details there. And then in 2 months' time, we will meet up for another online gathering. And we're going to have one of our local IxDF members, Eddie Rich. He's an experienced strategist, has recently been working as a director in UX. And so he's going to share some of his insights with us around UX strategy. So I hope you all join us then. This video is going to get posted on the IxDF YouTube channel. So if anybody wants to come back, re-listen, and get more wisdom from Blay's insights, please do. But until next time, take care. Thank you everyone for joining us.
Thank you.
And thank you, Blay. Really, really appreciate that.
Well, thanks for inviting me.
All right. Stop and record.